She was born with a horse face. Wait till you see 2 decades later. Grace McDaniels was born on March 14, 1888, and died on March 17, 1958. She had a terrible birth illness that made her look bad. In 1935, she won a contest for the ugliest woman and went on to have a successful career with Harry Lewiston's moving circus. McDaniels was called the ugliest and most mule-faced person in the world, based on a CT picture of a 20-month-old brain. Many websites say that McDaniels had Sturge-Weber syndrome, which is a rare birth defect. A port wine stain on the forehead, upper eyelid, or hair is a sign of Sturge-Weber syndrome. This is because the capillaries are swollen. The scar on the face could be on one side or the whole thing. McDaniels' illness got worse, and she had a scar on her face and an extra fold of skin 4 inches below her chin. Back in 1888, McDaniels was born and raised on a farm in a small Iowa town. As a child, her illness made it hard for her to talk. It took years for McDaniels to learn how to speak easily. People make fun of McDaniels because she looked strange. As expected, she looked for ways to hide her many flaws in her face. She put on makeup and a veil to hide the port wine spot as it got bigger. Later, McDaniels got married and had a son. They were married for a short time in the 1930s. Elmer is her son. At least he didn't have any problems with his face. He grew up to run his mom's business. He was hooked on drugs and drink. Elmer lied to and hurt his mother and stole from her. Not much is known about Elmer's dad, possibly the ex-husband of Grace McDaniel. Some stories say that Johnny, a drunk circus worker, got her pregnant after just one night with her. McDaniels won the contest for Ugliest Woman in 1935. This was the first time people heard about her weird show. McDaniels' career took off after she won the Ugliest Woman contest. She became a part of Harry Lewiston's moving freak show. She did sideshows all over the United States and in Canada. Based on dollartimes.com, McDaniels made $175 a week. In 1950, $175 was worth $1,753.89. She didn't like being called the world's ugliest woman in her first title. She talked to the organizers into calling her the mule-faced woman instead. For 20 years, McDaniels did well. Why aren't there many pictures of McDaniels? McDaniels thought that selling herself was a bad thing. She wasn't shy, but she didn't like having her pictures taken. In the picture below, McDaniels looks like she's hiding behind some other carnival performers. On the left are Grace McDaniel and her son, who look normal. On the right are Joseph Merrick and his beautiful mother. Chance makes most freaks, but symmetry affects what we find attractive and can tell us about healthy children. Even though symmetry can't tell you everything, it may change how much you love someone physically. The news story this morning about elephants' genes that cause tumors made me think of the elephant man's tumors. How many people would choose gene therapy if it made them look different, but made them live longer? If gene therapy makes tails possible, 99% of women will want them, and only a little less of guys. It's a stereotype that guys are much less likely to follow fashion trends than women, but I think of women as the human peacock. It's hard to picture erotic desire. How much does inner beauty beat out outer beauty? Because inner beauty takes time to see. It's easier to stand next to someone who has lost their beauty than to try to attract them. McDaniels and other weirdos were in danger of dying. She went on tour until she died in 1958. She died on her own at her home in Gibson, Florida. At about the same time, the title was given to Grace McDaniels, who most likely had the Sturge-Weber syndrome, a scar on her face and tumors. Bevan had to work in sideshows to support her 4 kids after she lost her husband. McDaniels felt so bad about the mean name, she persuaded the producers to call her the mule-faced woman instead. She went through the same pain as her due to her acromegaly. Beautiful English woman Mary Ann Bevan had to work in sideshows and fairs to support her family in the early 1900s. Mary Ann Bevan was born in the neighborhoods of London in late 1800s. She looked like any other young woman and was even pretty. She had a rare disease that made her look bad after having children more than once. The damage to her face, hands, and feet got worse over time, so Bevan used her looks to make money. To make money for her family, Mary Ann Bevan turned into the ugliest woman in the world and one of the saddest people in the entertainment business, which used to be very successful. Her early life. Mary Ann Webster was born on the east side of London on December 20th, 1874, into a large family. She grew up with her brothers and became a nurse in 1894. In 1903, she married Kent, farmer Thomas Bevan. The Bevans had 2 girls and 2 sons who were all healthy. They were all happy. Thomas died quickly in 1914, leaving Mary to take care of her 4 children on the little money that she made. Soon, she lost her husband. She got acromegaly, a condition in which the pituitary gland makes too many growth hormones. Acromegaly is a rare problem in the pituitary gland that can be fixed if found early. In the early 1900s, Bevans couldn't treat or avoid the disease, and her appearance quickly changed so much that it was impossible to tell who she was. Mary Ann Bevan had a big head. Because of Bevan's illness, her hands and her feet got too big for her body. Her forehead and lower jaw, as well as her nose, all got bigger. Because of her looks and all that changed all the time, it was hard for her to find work. So she did odd jobs to support her family. Her rare illness left her with lasting scars. Years later, someone who used to work at the fair said that a farmer told Bevan she was only good for the ugliest woman contest. The farmer told Bevan to join the homeliest woman contest, and she easily beat 250 other women. People who ran sideshows were interested in her, and since her doctor told her that her health would get worse, she used her fame to make money for her children. She often did shows at British fairs as part of a traveling show. When a London newspaper put an ad out for "Wanted Ugliest Woman" in 1920, Bevans answered. There was nothing gross, broken, or ugly. There was just chosen to be paid and have jobs for a long time. She was asked to send a recent picture. A British agent of the Barnum and Bailey Circus put the ad up because he thought she had an ugly but not unpleasant face. After sending an agent into a special picture, Bevans was asked to join the sideshow at Dreamland Amusement Park in Coney Island, which was one of the biggest sideshow venues in the world at the time. The attraction was made by Senator William H. Reynolds and Samuel Gumpertz, a famous sideshow businessman who worked with Harry Houdini. Lionel the Lion-Faced Man, Zip the Pinhead, and Jean Carroll the Tattooed Lady were some of the circus partners. In Dreamland, people could enjoy her 5'7" size, 11 feet, and 25 hands, even though she weighed 154 pounds. Bevan smiled in a forced way through the shame, but she sold postcards with pictures of herself to pay for the school of her children and herself. People kept coming to see Mary Ann Bevan, and she kept performing with Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey over the years. She was able to reach her goal of taking care of her kids, and she made £20,000 at the time, which is $1.6 million today. Mary Ann Bevan had friends beyond the circus crowd, and in her last days she found love. During a show at Madison Square Garden in 1929, she fell in love with Andrew, who was taking care of giraffes. She agreed to get a makeover at a beauty center in New York. The stylist gave her a massage, a manicure, straightened her hair, and put her in makeup. Some mean people said that Mary Ann's rouge powder and other things were nowhere to be found, like lace curtains, portholes of a dreadnought. I guess I'll be getting back to work, Mary Ann said as she looked into the mirror. Bevan worked at Coney Island until she died at the age of 59 on December 26, 1933. After being taken back home to be buried, she was buried in Brockley at Ladywell Cemetery in southeast London. Mary Ann Bevan was only known to people who liked sideshows for many years. Up until the early 2000s, Hallmark cards have made fun of her looks. The card was taken away because of worries about making her feel bad. Her kind has been around before. Wikipedia says that Edward Mondrake had a face on the back of his head in the 1800s. Mondrake had asked several doctors to take off the face because it only laughed or cried. Before he killed himself at the age of 23, he said he heard a voice saying horrible things. More information said the fake face couldn't see but laughed at Mondrake's jokes and smiled when he cried. It was one of the weirdest and saddest stories about deformities that Edward Mondrake told. In his 23rd year, he killed himself without claiming what was meant to be his English noble title. He refused to have anyone come visit, even his family. The young man was smart, talented, and good at singing. His body was graceful, and his face looked very great the way it was. A beautiful woman, as bad as a devil, could be seen on the back of his head. The woman had a mask on her face. In the Middle Ages, people were more interested in sideshows than in people with disabilities and medical complaints. People who looked different were once thought to be evil spirits or terrible signs. We don't say this to brag, but our medical care, we just want to make a point of saying that for a long time we changed one kind of othering for another. We won't use the word freaks because some disabilities activists have claimed it as their own. But Curious Child shows did the same thing. This time, though, it was meant to be out of the interest rather than the fear or ridicule, which is a premise that could be questioned. But we're going to look at some of the strangest sideshows that have ever been around, some of which are still common in today's more regulated sideshows. First, a diversion proved that staring wasn't really needed if you only had a health issue. We'll see that this is a joke. Huela's story isn't about the circus or shows, but it does talk about the strange 19th century trend of putting people with physical or medical problems on display as public performers. A Chinese worker named Hulu came to London in 1831 to have 58-pound tumor cut from his lower belly to his legs. 600 men, but no women, bought tickets to see the operation at Guy's Hospital. The procedure was done without anesthesia, which wasn't used in medicine for another 10 or 20 years. He died during the surgery. Laura Grant said that Hulu's story shows how the sideshow style made its way to popular culture, using freakishness to talk about disability and keep its disgusting tone. The next circus act made the most of its skills. In the late 1800s, French circus artist Joseph Pujol became well known. He had the worst gas and the best knowledge. Le Petit Man was a very skilled because he could take in a lot of hot water or air and spit it out very carefully like some of the other shows. If you don't think it's cool, then you're not 9 or 10 years old and haven't thought about all the options. Le Petit Man could blow out candles, shoot water very far, or play wind instruments. We get it, yes, he became famous in France with his flatulence and did shows at the Moulin Rouge. It's not clear how Pujol did this, but after he died in 1945, his family turned down a medical school's request to look at his rectum. Most of the time, sideshow freaks are more fun to watch than the real acts. It's nice to see the crowd getting yelled at instead of artists. Pascal Pignon, the Mexican with 2 heads, was the middle-of-the-road circus act, but he didn't really have 2 heads. His health problems set him off. A train worker in Texas named Pignon had a huge growth on his head. A promoter saw him and thought, that would definitely pretend that was a second head and put him in a traveling sideshow, like any other person would. A wax mask was put over the growth to make it look fake. Pignon was told to sit while the other people looked at him. Pignon didn't really have 2 heads, however. Craniopagus paratus is a disease that can make a person have a parasite twin head. Because dwarfism is just a joke, we are paying close attention to this one. The story about a circus is about the worst one. It's strange that a medical problem would ever fun to be talked about. Let's not act like P.T. Barnum was okay with just showing off his talents either. Tom Thumb, whose real name is Charles Stratton, was a famous dwarf artist in the middle of the 1800s. Could the 2-foot-tall Tom Thumb do its job? Of course not. Tom began acting when he was 5 years old, but Barnum told him to say he loved it. His shocking behavior is more shocking, but the medical problems were just funny sideshows, even if they were shocking. Let's look at a show that might make people who are already going to call it 911 instead of getting tickets. What do you think about this? Is this something that should not be shown? Let us know in the comment section below.